What happens when a Hollywood actor known for tech investments and philanthropy sits across from one of daytime television's most sharp and legally trained co-hosts, and the conversation shifts from polite promotion to a pointed debate about responsibility, media narratives, and accountability? Make sure to subscribe to Chronicle Chat and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The camera pans across the table as the applause settles. Ashton Kutcher is seated at the far end, smiling, relaxed but alert. Across from him sits Sunny Hostin, posture straight, hands folded over her notes. The rest of the panel exchanges quick glances. This is expected to be a standard promotional segment, but there's already a different kind of energy in the room. Sunny begins in her calm, measured tone. Ashton, you've been very vocal about technology, about online safety, about civic engagement. But recently, there's been a lot of debate about celebrity influence and political commentary. Do you think celebrities sometimes overstep? There's light laughter from the audience. Ashton smiles. That didn't take long, he says, nodding. The audience laughs again. Well, Sunny replies, we're here to have real conversations. He leans forward slightly. I think everyone has a right to speak. Celebrity or not. We're citizens first. Sunny tilts her head. Sure, but when you have 20 million followers, is it still just speaking as a citizen? Or is it shaping public opinion in a way that requires more responsibility? There's a low murmur from the audience, not hostile, but attentive. Ashton nods slowly. Responsibility is important. I agree with that. That's why I try to focus on issues where I've done the work. Human trafficking, child protection, tech accountability. I don't tweet random opinions. Sunny interrupts gently. But you have weighed in on policy debates. Because policy affects those issues, he says quickly, though still smiling. One of the other co-hosts jumps in, trying to keep things light. I think what Sunny's asking is, do you think sometimes celebrities think they're experts? The audience laughs again, this time louder. Ashton chuckles. Oh, absolutely. I think sometimes we do. I'm not claiming I'm an expert on everything. But I do spend a lot of time working with data scientists, lawmakers, people in law enforcement. I'm not just sitting in my trailer Googling headlines. Sunny nods but presses on. And yet, critics say that when celebrities advocate publicly, it can polarize issues. Especially when emotions run high. There's a slight pause. Ashton's expression shifts, still calm, but more focused. Polarization doesn't start with celebrities. It starts with systems. Media ecosystems. Political incentives. I think it's easy to blame someone with a recognizable face. A few audience members clap. It's scattered but noticeable. Sunny doesn't clap. She keeps eye contact. But you benefit from that recognizable face. The room tightens slightly. It's subtle, but the tone has shifted from playful to pointed. Of course I do, Ashton says. And I try to use that benefit to amplify people who don't have it. Sunny flips a page in her notes. Let's talk about amplification. When you speak on complex legal issues, do you worry that you might simplify them for the sake of a platform like Instagram? Ashton pauses. This is the first real hesitation. Social media simplifies everything, he says. That's not unique to me. But you choose to participate, Sunny responds. He nods. Yes, because not participating doesn't fix the problem. The audience reacts with a mix of applause and murmurs. It's not divided, but it's engaged. Another co-host interjects, sensing the tension. I think what's interesting is, Ashton, you've worked closely with lawmakers. Sunny, you are a former prosecutor. So this is kind of a meeting of two worlds. Sunny smiles slightly. Exactly. Ashton gestures toward her. And I respect that. That's why I'm here. I don't mind hard questions. Sunny doesn't back down. Okay, here's a hard one. Do you think there's a difference between advocacy and influence? Because sometimes those lines blur. He inhales slowly. Advocacy is about pushing for change based on evidence and lived experience. Influence is just having people listen to you. I can't control whether people listen. I can control whether I've done the homework. Have you ever gotten it wrong? Sunny asks immediately. The audience lets out a soft, oh. Ashton nods. Of course. I've posted things I later thought. I could have phrased that better. I've learned publicly. Sunny raises an eyebrow. But when you learn publicly, millions learn with you. Sometimes incorrectly first. There's a beat. Ashton's smile fades just slightly. That's fair, he says. But I'd argue that's how society learns now. In real time. Imperfectly. Sunny leans forward. Imperfectly can be dangerous. The audience quiets. In law, she continues, precision matters. Words matter. Context matters. And when high-profile individuals weigh in, it can sway juries of public opinion before facts are established. Ashton nods, but this time he doesn't immediately respond. He looks thoughtful, then speaks slowly. You're right. Words matter. That's why I try to stick to facts. Data. Verified cases. I don't speculate on criminal investigations. Sunny counters. But you have criticized institutions broadly. Yes, he says more firmly now. Because institutions need accountability. There's a ripple of applause. Sunny's voice stays steady. Accountability should be grounded in legal process. And public pressure often drives legal process, Ashton replies a little quicker than before. The audience reacts, a louder mix of applause and a few audible gasps. One co-host laughs nervously. Okay, we're getting into it now. Sunny doesn't laugh. Public pressure can also compromise due process. And silence can protect wrongdoing, Ashton responds. There it is. The first clear edge. The audience is fully engaged now, some clapping, some sitting very still. Sunny holds his gaze. So you're suggesting that media advocacy is necessary to counter legal systems? I'm suggesting, Ashton says carefully, that without public awareness, many issues stay buried. There's a long pause. The kind that feels very live. Very real. Sunny breaks it. And who decides what gets amplified? Ashton shrugs slightly. People do. Viewers do. Voters do. And algorithms, she says pointedly. A few audience members laugh. And algorithms, he agrees, nodding. The moderator tries to lighten the tone again. Well, this is definitely not a typical promotional segment. The audience laughs, tension easing just a notch. But Sunny goes in once more, her tone still calm but unmistakably firm. Ashton, I respect your work. Truly. But do you acknowledge that sometimes celebrity activism can unintentionally overshadow experts who've been in the trenches for decades? He doesn't answer immediately. He looks down for a moment, then back up. Yes, he says quietly. That's a risk. And it's something I think about. The audience softens. The energy shifts again, not combative but reflective. And, he adds, that's why I try to bring those experts into the conversation. I don't want the spotlight. I want the issue addressed. Sunny studies him for a second longer. Intentions matter, but outcomes matter more. Ashton nods slowly. Agreed. The room is quiet now, not tense but attentive. The conversation has moved past surface-level banter. It feels layered, real. One co-host smiles. Well, this is why we have these conversations. The audience applauds, this time more unified. But you can tell, this isn't over. The smiles are thinner. The pauses are longer. The debate has only just begun, and both of them know it. And as the segment heads toward its first break, the cameras catch one last exchange of eye contact between Ashton and Sunny. Respectful, but charged. The host announces, "We'll be right back." The applause swells. But the real discussion is just getting started. As the show returns from commercial, the panel is back on camera. The applause settles quickly, leaving a palpable tension in the room. Ashton Kutcher is leaning slightly forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. Sunny Hostin is reviewing her notes but keeps glancing up, clearly ready to pick up where they left off. The audience is buzzing, murmurs audible, as if sensing the conversation is going to get sharper this time. Sunny starts, her tone calm but pointed. Ashton, let's talk specifics. You've used your platform to advocate for social issues. Human trafficking, online safety, children's rights. But critics argue that sometimes celebrity involvement shifts the narrative from nuanced solutions to sound bites. How do you respond to that? Ashton nods thoughtfully. I understand that critique. It's valid. And the last thing I want is to reduce complex issues to catchphrases. That's why I try to back my messages with resources, link people to nonprofits, research legal frameworks, the stuff that actually matters. The audience reacts with a low hum of approval. Sunny leans forward slightly. But is that enough? Because the moment someone like you speaks, it can overshadow career activists, lawyers, investigators who've been working on these issues for years. Ashton holds her gaze. I know, and that's why I make an effort to shine a light on their work. I try to be a megaphone, not the story itself. A co-host interjects with a chuckle, trying to lighten the atmosphere. It's just that sometimes a megaphone can get louder than the message. Ashton laughs lightly. Fair point. The audience laughs along. Sunny doesn't laugh. And what about accountability? You're in the public eye. Your statements are quoted instantly, dissected, sometimes misinterpreted. How do you ensure that your advocacy doesn't inadvertently harm the very causes you're trying to support? Ashton leans back, hands moving expressively. I think about that constantly. Every tweet, every post, every public statement is a decision. I run things by experts whenever possible. But I also believe that staying silent to avoid mistakes isn't a solution. The audience murmurs. Some nod, some frown, clearly engaged with the nuance. Sunny flips a page. Let's pivot to political commentary. You've made statements on policy and government decisions in the past. Do you feel there's a line you shouldn't cross? Ashton glances at the other hosts before answering. I think there's a line everyone should consider: accuracy, respect, and understanding the impact. I don't speak to score points. I speak to shed light where I have knowledge or experience. But yes, it's easy to cross that line if you're careless. The audience reacts, a mix of soft applause and murmurs. Sunny presses on. And yet, sometimes the line seems blurry. You might intend to educate, but the media simplifies, amplifies, or even distorts the message. Doesn't that concern you? Ashton nods slowly. Absolutely. That's why I try to stay grounded in facts. If the facts are unclear, I say so. I don't speculate. Another co-host jumps in. But Ashton, speculation is part of the conversation these days. Social media thrives on it. He smiles wryly. And that's the danger. People confuse noise for knowledge. The audience laughs softly. Sunny continues. Let's talk about the public's reaction. You've had moments where your statements caused backlash. Intense discussions online, viral threads dissecting your words. How does that affect your approach moving forward? Ashton leans forward, elbows resting on the table again. It's humbling. It reminds me that influence is a responsibility. It doesn't stop me from speaking, but it forces me to be thoughtful, deliberate, and constantly learning. The audience responds with light applause. Sunny's tone shifts subtly, more challenging. And learning publicly can be risky. The public isn't always forgiving, and mistakes are magnified. Does that risk ever make you hesitate? Ashton pauses, then nods. Sure, it's intimidating. But I'd rather risk being wrong and correcting it than risk being silent and complicit. The audience murmurs, some nodding. There's a mix of support and skepticism, exactly the tension that keeps talk shows alive. Sunny leans in, voice firm. But do you acknowledge that public mistakes can have real-world consequences? People may take action based on something you say without understanding the full context. Yes, Ashton replies quietly. I can't ignore that. But I also believe education and dialogue can mitigate harm. That's why conversations like this are necessary, not just for me, but for the audience. The camera pans slightly to the audience. Some are nodding intently, others whispering to their neighbors, clearly drawn in by the back and forth. One co-host jumps in, trying to break the intensity. So, Ashton, is it fair to say you're walking a tightrope between advocacy and influence? Ashton smiles. Exactly. A tightrope. And sometimes you wobble. But that's part of learning in public. Sunny folds her hands, voice measured. Wobbling is understandable. But when that tightrope spans millions of followers, the stakes are enormous. Do you ever feel burdened by that? He leans back, thoughtful. It's a responsibility I take seriously. I try to be accountable, consult experts, listen, and correct myself when needed. But I also accept that I won't get it perfect every time. No one does. The audience responds with quiet applause. The co-hosts exchange glances. It's clear the conversation is heating up, but it's still grounded. Real. Authentic. Sunny's tone shifts slightly, sharper now. And yet, some would argue that the influence of someone like you can unintentionally politicize issues that should be approached as nonpartisan, such as human trafficking or public safety. How do you handle that? Ashton's expression tightens slightly. I try to keep the message focused on the issue itself, the victims, the solutions, the laws, rather than political affiliation. But I won't lie, it's hard when everything is filtered through a partisan lens. The audience reacts, some murmurs, some nods. You can feel the room's attention sharpen. Sunny leans back, voice deliberate. So, you're aware of the risks, the potential for misinterpretation, and the power you hold. And yet, you continue to engage publicly. That's courageous, or some might say reckless. Ashton chuckles softly. Maybe both. But I'd rather be engaged and imperfect than disengaged and complicit. The audience laughs and claps, some standing for emphasis. One co-host attempts to lighten the mood, gesturing to Ashton. Well, you certainly keep things interesting. Sunny doesn't smile. Interesting isn't enough. Impact matters. Ashton nods, acknowledging the point. I hear you. And that's why I value conversations like this, challenging, uncomfortable, and real. The camera pans across the audience one more time. You can see people leaning forward, fully invested. The tension hasn't dissipated, it's only deepened. As the segment moves toward a commercial break, the audience applause is louder this time, not just polite but engaged. Ashton and Sunny exchange one last look across the table, respect mingled with subtle defiance. The co-hosts smile nervously. All right, everyone, we're taking a quick break. When we return, we'll dig even deeper into these questions, and things might get even more heated. The cameras fade out, leaving the audience buzzing. The conversation isn't over. In fact, it feels like it's only beginning. The show comes back from the break, and the energy in the studio is noticeably higher. The audience is buzzing, some clapping, others whispering. Ashton Kutcher sits upright, visibly alert, while Sunny Hostin adjusts her notes, her eyes sharp and focused. It's clear both are ready to dive deeper, and the co-hosts are slightly tense, aware this part of the conversation could escalate. Sunny starts, her voice calm but cutting. Ashton, you've spoken a lot about responsibility and being informed. But let's tackle influence head-on. When you advocate publicly, do you ever fear that your celebrity status can unintentionally silence experts whose work is critical? Ashton leans in, hands clasped. I do think about that, and I actively try to avoid that. My goal isn't to overshadow experts. It's to amplify their voices, to get their work out to audiences who otherwise wouldn't see it. A few audience members nod in approval, some murmur in agreement. Sunny presses on. And yet, the way social media works, often the celebrity voice is what gets shared, and expert nuance gets lost. How do you ensure that nuance isn't drowned out? He pauses, reflecting. I can't control how people share information, but I can control what I put out there. I try to link resources, cite experts, provide context. And I always encourage people to go deeper, not just take my word. One co-host laughs lightly. Encouraging people to read? That's almost revolutionary for social media. The audience chuckles. Ashton smiles slightly, appreciating the humor. Sunny doesn't laugh. Humor aside, there's still a risk. A tweet or a post can be misinterpreted, politicized, or weaponized. Do you think that risk outweighs the potential benefit? Ashton leans back, thoughtful. It's a balance. I won't lie, there's risk. But the alternative is staying silent. And staying silent doesn't solve anything. The audience reacts, some clap softly, others lean forward in their seats. Sunny's tone sharpens. Let's get real. Sometimes the issues you address, like policy, tech ethics, or social justice, are not just complex, but also politically charged. When you enter that space, do you worry about contributing to polarization? Ashton's eyes narrow slightly. I do, and I'm aware of it. But again, silence doesn't reduce polarization. Engagement, responsible engagement, can create awareness and sometimes bridge divides. One co-host chimes in. Responsible engagement. Easier said than done in a world where headlines drive everything. Ashton nods. Exactly. And I try to focus on facts, not headlines. I encourage people to question sources, check multiple perspectives, and look at evidence before forming opinions. Sunny leans in, voice firm. And yet, people will still interpret what you say through their own biases. Influence is inevitable, whether you like it or not. Are you comfortable with that? He takes a deep breath. I'm comfortable acknowledging it. I'm not comfortable being careless. I have to own that my words carry weight. The audience murmurs, some nodding, some whispering to neighbors. The tension is tangible, not hostile, but very real. Sunny doesn't relent. And when mistakes happen, as they inevitably do in public life, do you think a celebrity apology carries the same weight as an expert correction? Or does it sometimes amplify the wrong message? Ashton pauses. It depends. A mistake can be an opportunity to educate if handled properly. If it's ignored or denied, that's when the damage compounds. I try to correct publicly and transparently. The audience reacts, scattered applause. Some people are clearly impressed by his candor, while others seem skeptical. Another co-host tries to shift tone. You've mentioned human trafficking before. That's one area where your advocacy has received praise. How do you decide which issues to speak on and which to leave to experts? Ashton gestures with his hands, deliberate. I focus on areas where I can contribute something meaningful, either knowledge, platform, or resources. I collaborate with experts, NGOs, and law enforcement. I don't speak just for attention. Sunny presses further. But even with collaboration, your name draws more attention than theirs. Isn't there a chance that the message becomes about you, not the issue? He leans back, expression thoughtful. Yes, that's always a risk. And it's something I think about constantly. The goal is to make sure the spotlight shines on the issue, not on me. The audience reacts. Some nod, some whisper agreements, the tension slightly easing but the seriousness intact. Sunny flips a page in her notes. Let's pivot slightly. In addition to advocacy, you've also engaged in discussions around political matters. Do you worry that entering policy debates could be misinterpreted as taking sides? Ashton nods. Absolutely. But I try to focus on the substance, not the party. Policy impacts real lives, and I want to contribute where I can add clarity or highlight overlooked problems. I'm careful about partisanship, but I won't ignore critical issues. The audience murmurs. Some clap softly. A few lean forward, clearly invested in the dialogue. Sunny leans forward, tone sharpened. And yet, perception often overrides intent. People interpret messages through their political lenses. Do you think that's something you can ever fully control? He shakes his head slightly. No, you can't control perception. But you can be mindful of it. You can provide context, be transparent, and engage responsibly. That's all we can do as public figures. One co-host interjects. So, Ashton, would you say you've learned from previous moments when your statements caused backlash? He nods slowly. Yes. And I've learned that transparency, acknowledging mistakes, and amplifying expert voices are crucial. That's part of the responsibility you carry when millions are watching. Sunny's expression softens just slightly, though her tone remains deliberate. So it's not just about speaking. It's about listening, learning, and ensuring your voice doesn't drown out the very people doing the work. Exactly, Ashton agrees. And that's why conversations like this matter. The dialogue, the pushback, the challenge. It keeps you accountable. The audience responds with sustained applause. There's energy, engagement, but no hostility. Sunny leans back, voice steady but final for the segment. Accountability, transparency, and intention. It sounds like you're aware of the stakes, Ashton. But awareness alone doesn't prevent missteps. Ashton smiles faintly. No, it doesn't. But it's a start. And the alternative, silence, doesn't move the needle on anything. The camera pans across the audience. Some clap, some sit quietly, clearly thinking about the implications. The co-hosts exchange quick glances, the tension palpable but respectful. One co-host chuckles lightly, trying to ease the mood. Well, folks, I think we've officially moved past the surface-level questions. Sunny doesn't laugh. Surface-level questions don't solve problems. That's why we dig deeper. Ashton nods, leaning slightly forward. And I appreciate that. This is the kind of dialogue that actually matters. The audience applause rises again. There's a sense that while the debate is intense, it's also productive, grounded, and real. As the segment nears its next break, the co-hosts signal subtly to the camera. We're going to come back and tackle the toughest part of this conversation: public reaction, social media, and what happens after the cameras stop rolling. The applause continues as the camera fades out, leaving the room buzzing. The conversation is far from over. The most revealing and tense moments are still ahead. The cameras return from the break, and the tension in the studio is thicker than ever. Ashton Kutcher sits with his hands folded on the table, posture alert but composed. Sunny Hostin leans slightly forward, eyes fixed, radiating that sharp focus she's known for. The audience is buzzing, whispers running through the crowd, as if bracing for a confrontation or a revelation. Sunny starts deliberately, her voice calm but unmistakably serious. Ashton, we've talked about influence, responsibility, and public perception. But let's get into what happens once the cameras stop rolling. Public reaction can be immediate, fierce, and often unforgiving. How do you navigate that? Ashton takes a breath, leaning forward. I think it's part of the territory. You put yourself out there, you open yourself to scrutiny. Social media amplifies everything, both praise and criticism. I read what I can learn from it, but I don't let the noise dictate my decisions. The audience murmurs, some nod, some whisper. There's a sense they're hanging on every word. Sunny presses on, voice steady but edged. And yet, there are moments when public response can misrepresent your intentions. People take snippets, headlines, viral clips, and suddenly the nuance is gone. How do you reconcile the impact you can't control? Ashton nods slowly. It's frustrating, honestly. But I've learned that mistakes, misinterpretations, or backlash are opportunities to clarify, educate, and sometimes engage directly with the community. Silence isn't productive. Correction and transparency are. One co-host chimes in, trying to lighten the intensity. So basically, you're saying the internet is part classroom, part battlefield? Ashton smiles slightly. Exactly. And you've got to be prepared for both. The audience laughs lightly. Sunny's tone sharpens. And what about the aftermath beyond social media? Press coverage, public debates, even policy implications. How much of a responsibility do you feel for outcomes that happen after you speak? He leans back, expression serious. A lot. I can't control everything, but I can control my approach. Staying informed, consulting experts, being accurate, and acknowledging when I don't know something. I can try to guide the conversation responsibly, but I can't control every reaction. The audience reacts with soft applause. They appreciate the honesty. Sunny folds her hands. And yet, even with all that caution, there are times when your voice, because of who you are, overshadows those who've spent years working on these issues. Does that ever weigh on you? Yes, Ashton admits. That's a constant concern. I don't want to take attention away from people doing the critical work. That's why I strive to amplify them, highlight their research, their advocacy, their voices. My name draws attention, but the story should always belong to the cause, not me. The audience murmurs in agreement, some nodding. There's a noticeable shift. People are thinking, reflecting. Sunny continues, her voice firm. And what about accountability after the fact? Mistakes get magnified. Statements get clipped. Public opinion can turn overnight. How do you measure success when outcomes are unpredictable? Ashton's expression is measured. I measure success by whether awareness is raised, resources are mobilized, and people are informed. I can't control virality or outrage. I focus on tangible impact, donations, engagement with nonprofits, policy attention. That's how I know whether what I'm doing matters. The audience applauds again. There's a sense that his words are landing, even if the discussion is challenging. Sunny leans in slightly, eyes sharp. And social media? It's relentless. Criticism, trolling, praise, misinterpretation. Does it ever feel overwhelming? He smiles faintly. It does. But I try to treat it like any other tool. Powerful if used correctly, destructive if ignored or mishandled. I step back when needed, consult with experts, and remind myself why I started engaging in the first place. The issues, not the attention. A co-host jokes lightly. So Ashton, social media is your double-edged sword? He chuckles softly. Exactly. Sharp but necessary. The audience laughs. Sunny's tone remains deliberate. Finally, let's talk about the bigger picture. Public discourse, influence, celebrity engagement. What do you hope the audience takes away from conversations like this? Ashton pauses, looking around the room. I hope people see that influence is a responsibility. That speaking out isn't easy. That mistakes will happen, but transparency, correction, and learning are key. I hope viewers understand that advocacy requires thought, research, humility, and collaboration. And most importantly, I hope people feel empowered to engage in their communities responsibly. The audience responds with sustained applause. Many stand, clearly impressed. Some whisper to neighbors, nodding. The co-hosts exchange quick glances. The tension has transformed into reflection. Sunny leans back, voice calm but firm. Accountability, awareness, and engagement. Those are the takeaways. And while celebrity voices will always carry weight, what matters most is the impact on the issues, the communities, and the people directly affected. Ashton nods. Absolutely. That's why conversations like this, challenging as they are necessary. Not just for me, but for everyone watching. The camera pans across the audience, capturing a mixture of applause, contemplation, and quiet reflection. Social media reactions are already trending. Clips of the intense exchanges between Ashton and Sunny have started circulating online, sparking heated debates and discussions in real time. Hashtags referencing the segment are climbing. Analysts, fans, and critics alike are weighing in, some praising his candor, others questioning the influence of celebrity advocacy. Back in the studio, the co-hosts smile, though the energy remains charged. Well, that was certainly one for the books, one of them says. Sunny gives a slight nod. It's real. That's what matters. Ashton smiles faintly. Real conversations, real accountability, real impact. That's all anyone can ask for. The audience applauds again, standing this time. The cameras slowly pan out, capturing the moment. A live talk show debate that was intense, emotional, and grounded in reality. The host wraps up. Thank you, Ashton, for joining us and for engaging so openly. And thank you, Sunny, for asking the tough questions. To everyone watching, share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Chronicle Chat for more real talk show stories. The applause swells as the show fades to commercial. Backstage, Ashton and Sunny exchange a respectful handshake. There's no animosity, only mutual acknowledgement of a challenging conversation navigated with honesty and intention. Social media continues to buzz, articles are written, and clips are shared, sparking discussions across platforms. The segment becomes a talking point for hours, a reflection of the very issues they discussed: influence, responsibility, and the impact of public voices. The studio empties, but the conversation, both in public discourse and in personal reflection, continues. And that's exactly the point. Real dialogue, real tension, and real consequences in a world where every word matters.